Welcome to the All Hoop Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman, joined as always by co-host, producer to the stars, Chris Brito. Free agency saw many big-time players change teams, including Klay Thompson, Paul George, and a few others. Before we get to all that, Chris, my friend, we're in the middle of the summer. Things are starting to slow down with the NBA, but we still have a lot to talk about. How are you?
Hey Steve, happy to be here. The NBA offseason hasn't disappointed so far. A lot of moving pieces. I think among the biggest ones was Paul George going to the 76ers, DeMar DeRozan going to the Kings. We could start anywhere, but I feel like a lot of the discussion has been about how the Philly are going to be among the top teams in the East. But what happens to the Clippers? The Clippers are about to move into this nice stadium in, I believe, Inglewood,
Yeah.
and they chose to re-sign Kawhi to a big contract, but decided against doing that for Paul George. And they essentially replaced them with, some nice wings, but no player that you would consider on the caliber of Paul George. So, what do you make of that situation with the Clippers? And do you even rank them as a playoff team? Because I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it puts them in a position that I say this is the last position you want to be in, which is no man's land. They go all in. They continue to be all in for this group. They give Kawhi the not mega extension, but they gave him the 3-year extension. They give Harden the money, and then they say, Paul George, we're drawing the line in the sand for you. I don't understand it. I don't really understand the thought process here because they came out and said the reason we didn't give him the money the fourth year was because of this second apron. And you're going to hear a lot about the second apron in the next few years. That it's like this boogeyman that is stopping these rich teams from spending all this crazy money. But at the end of the day, like you're nothing now. You have Kawhi Leonard, who you now need to play 70 games a year, which is just not happening. You have James Harden, who's going to go back to rocket ball the moment Kawhi is off the court, which is going to be frequently. And like we talk about the guys that they brought in, like Derek Jones, Batum, like these are solid players, but like these are not guys who are really difference makers. These are not even to me quality starters in the league. They're going to have their moments as rotation guys, but you have two elite players who both have not shown they can be reliable at any time, whether it's regular season or postseason at this point, and they're just going the wrong way. And you think, okay, they're going the wrong way. You try this out for a year, and then if it's not working, you trade Kawhi, you move on from Harden. No, you can't because you don't have your draft picks till 2030, Chris. 2030.
I don't like truly, I don't know what Ballmer was thinking. Like I totally get not wanting to spend more money. Um, but it's not like this was going to be a surprise. Anyway, I'm happy for Paul George for getting the bag, but the Clippers are going to be a carcass. I don't think they're going to be not even a top 10 team in the
I
West.
think they're going to be between 6 and 10.
Mm, that's too generous.
Um, I think there's going to be times this year where they look good, and then there's going to be times when Kawhi is not here for a month, and it's
Well,
hard ball. They're
well, that's
playing a
what I'm
couple games
saying.
under 500.
Well, that's exactly what like, can the Clippers win enough games without the 20 plus games that Kawhi Leonard would probably miss this year?
I think with them they can play at a 50-win pace, and without Kawhi, they're going to play at a 35-win pace. And so I
Wow,
think you mix those
that's really
together, and what do you get? You get a 500 team. To me, that puts them in that 8 to 10 range. And again, this was a team trying to win a championship and steal back some fans from LA. That's not happening now. Like that's so far gone. We're talking now about can they be relevant? Like that's where we are with the Clippers right now. This is just a total disaster. The Paul George trade, which at the time like seemed like a steep price, right? It was SGA. Now one of those draft picks became Jalen Williams, and many more draft picks in the future. But Chris, this has turned out to be one of the all-time worst blunders in trade history in the NBA.
yeah. I mean, what the Clippers have three playoff series wins, since they've
In
gotten
that era. Yeah, those guys have been together for 5 years. So like I
and
understand them going, this isn't working. It's time to move on. But then why not move on from Kawhi? Kawhi's been more injured than Paul George.
I don't get it. I think part of me thinks Ballmer felt more loyal to Kawhi because that was like his first like major get. It seems like
But they
Ballmer.
were like a day, they were the same day, basically. Kawhi said, I'm not coming here without
Well,
another guy. And they brought in
well,
Paul George.
here's
They
the
got him
reason
at the
why I
same
say
time.
that. Paul George doesn't go to LA without his boy there.
But Kawhi doesn't go to LA without Paul George.
Fine.
The point is, it just seems like they got one foot
He
in
was
water, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
To me, what doesn't make sense is like not getting the most value out of Paul George. Like if you had the intention to move on and you knew that he wasn't happy with the offers before the opening day of free agency, why didn't you try to make a deal where you got some assets in return? That part doesn't make sense to me. Like if you weren't sure, it seems pretty obvious what you should be doing to replenish the talent on that team, or at the very least, draft picks.
No, I'm with you there. I think it just got complicated from the fact that you heard Paul George say it this week. The first offer was 2 years, 60 million. Like that is such a underpay for a guy of his caliber that like it's really hard to recover from there. So then it becomes okay. He asked, around February, he asked for the Kawhi money, which is 3 years, like 154-ish million. They say no to that. So once which that was their big blunder. They either got to move on from him there, as you said, trade him in February, or give him the Kawhi money and say, we're trying this again because we really don't have any other options. Because they don't. Like they can't flip this into like, an Oklahoma City situation. It's not like they could trade Paul George for a million draft picks. They were going to probably get a useful player and a pick. And it just wasn't worth it for them. But they're just so far deep in this thing right now. I don't know why they didn't continue. All right. How about Klay Thompson, Chris? He's a Mav. Real quick, I know we want to kind of focus on the teams that lost their players today, but in terms of the Mavericks, do you think they're the title favorite out west? With Klay Thompson added to the mix with Luka and Kyrie?
I mean, I think after the Lakers for sure. No, I'm kidding.
I like that.
Uh,
Pretty good.
you know what? I actually think OKC are are the West favorites to me. They replenished their whole team. They're still younger. They're entering their prime. I think they're the team to beat. I completely acknowledge that the Mavericks made the Western Conference Finals, and the finals obviously because they beat OKC. But I feel like OKC replenished their roster in a way that keeps everything that they have while addressing the weaknesses. So back to Dallas, I think Dallas's biggest issue was that they just simply didn't get enough from Kyrie. I mean, not simply, it's a lot more complicated than that. And they just didn't have enough guys to to give offense. So I do think Clay helps. The experience obviously helps, but I don't think this moves the barometer as much as we think it will.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think Clay's gonna have a good year there. But I think those guys kind of played a little over their heads already. Like PJ Washington to me is not a legit, 18 point a game guy who's gonna shoot 50% from three kind of guy. I think, they had three legit, all-star level players. Now, obviously Clay's maybe a step below that at this point in his career, but offensively he's still there. And so I think they're going to be a really good team. I think this cements them into at least the middle of the pack in the West. Because you kind of forget, like, this was a team that almost missed the playoffs. They were kind of battling, the Clippers and the Suns for 4, 5, 6 out west. And so I think this kind of cements them in that top four, which I think is important for them right now. But I would still put them below, as you said, OKC. I put them below Denver, and I put them below Minnesota.
Wow.
I think those are the three best teams. I would be surprised if one of those three did not go to the finals this year.
I think to me, I'd probably go OKC, Dallas, Denver, Minnesota.
Okay, so you're higher on Dallas than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think they may still have the edge that puts them there. It just all depends on whether they can replicate what they did in the playoffs and have some more like regular season success.
Okay, so now going from the Golden State side, they lose Klay Thompson. They lose him basically for nothing. They do not get really anything out of this. There was a sign and trade involved with Josh Green, but Josh Green is not the one going to Golden State. He's going elsewhere. So really, the Warriors have nothing to show for this. They make a quick pivot. They go get Buddy Hield, who I understand Klay is now not the same player he was, but like Buddy Hield was kind of invisible in the playoffs last year. And so I think asking him to be like a 16 point a game guy on good shooting and not be a liability defensively, I think that's asking too much. I think this Warrior team is in for big trouble. I don't see them as a playoff team. I think they're worse than the Clippers. I think, Stephen Curry is an incredible player, but like, is Wiggins done? It seems like the last 2 years he's been really non-existent. We talk about Tobias Harris kind of being an empty $40 million. Wiggins to me has been worse. You have Draymond Green who just can't stay on the court. Offensively, he just doesn't give you anything anymore. And those three guys are making 100. Those three guys are making well over $100 million. So I don't really see how they can fix this. I don't really know how they can take a leap unless Kuminga becomes a all-star player this season. I think to me, this is a team fighting for the play-in.
I don't disagree with them fighting for a play-in, but I do think they're better than the Clippers. I think that Kuminga is going to take a step. We saw flashes of that last year, and to some degree, it depends on whether Wiggins has a decent year. So we're just gonna have to see about that. That being said, I think the Warriors are at least a top seven team. But as we noted earlier, the West is going to be a much stronger team, much stronger conference than it was last year. You have teams like Memphis coming back. The Rockets have improved. So, it won't be easy for the Warriors, but I still don't think the Clippers are better than them at all.
I don't know. I mean, I've always been higher on the Clippers than most, but like, what is Andrew Wiggins? He averaged 13 a game last year. They put him on the bench for a couple of those games. He came off the bench 12 times. His minutes were way down to 27 a game. He's still only 29 years old. So
Mhm.
it's like it's not an age thing, but it's just like what happened here? Like I don't really understand. Like the shooting is way down. He just doesn't look like the same guy that you saw in the finals. And 26 million this year, 28 million the year after that, and then a $30 million player option. So like this is not a guy who's going away anytime soon. I don't believe this is a guy you could package in a deal for a bunch of other stuff. People keep saying, "Oh, like just package him with Paul, like for Paul George." Like I don't think the Clippers were ever taking that for one, because like why would you want Andrew Wiggins on your books? And if not, just keep Paul George. If you're gonna spend the money, just keep Paul George. But I just don't see it. And then with the Draymond thing, it's like, what is he at this point in his career? Forget the stuff he's doing that's getting him suspended. It's just like
You know
on
what
the
he
court,
is at this point in his career?
James Rodman.
A podcaster. That's what he is. He's not a basketball player anymore.
That is good. That is pretty good. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know. Like offensively, he's just not really anything. And again, like the shooting was better, believe it or not, last year. 39% from three, but he's shooting, less than one a game. This is not a deep threat. This is more just a guy who hasn't been taking as many the last few years. Um, Defensively, I still think he's a very good player, if not great. Um,
Hmm.
but just where's the offense coming from? I mean, if it's got to be Wiggins, it's got to be Buddy Hield, or it's going to be the young guys, Padinsky and we just said his name in Kaminga. Those guys got to step up and become borderline stars. And look,
I think it's gonna be a breakout year for Kuminga.
okay, and then you know what? If it is, then the Warriors are probably back in the playoffs. They're better than the Clippers, and
I
I'm
mean,
going to eat the pro.
it really depends on whether Kerr makes a decision to embrace the younger players. Like he was beginning to do that at the end of last year. Um, and he sort of just had to because Wiggins was what he was. So we'll see.
Right. Okay, fair
We'll see.
enough.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our Knicks. Obviously they had a big offseason. They acquired Mikal Bridges, they re-signed OG Anunoby. Isaiah Hartenstein leaves for the Thunder. So now they're a little short center. It seems to be the only position that they really could use some more depth. It's Mitchell Robinson as a starter once again, with Jericho Sims as the backup. There doesn't seem to really be another option in terms of a center that can help them right now in terms of free agency. We've seen even the guys we kind of liked all got way too much money. They don't have a lot to spend. So, Chris, my strategy is this: the G League is filled with amazing talent. Go out there, find the best rebounder from this upcoming season, and say, you are gonna, we're gonna give you $1 million. You're gonna change your life, and you are gonna compete with Jericho Sims for the entire year for those backup, 20-minute a game minutes. And if one of those guys emerges as a legit guy you can trust for some time in the playoffs, then they keep the job. And if not, you just go out and get a guy in the buyout market in February. I think you can really do this cheaply. I don't think they really need to overstress this thing. I would just try a couple of kids and just say, we're trying this out because, the G League guys who come up and play, a lot of the time they look like they belong because there's just so much talent, Chris. Like, there's just more talent than the 30 teams can hold. And so now the Knicks have a legit opportunity to give somebody a chance. And I think if they get the right guy, I don't know who that guy is, but they get the right guy, this could turn out to be a blessing in disguise where they could find a really good role player for very cheap.
So I don't disagree with that. I think they did sign one of the rookies to a two-way contract,
Yeah.
Ariel Hookporty. I believe he played in the professional league in Australia. Australia is widely considered one of the better leagues for basketball. Anyway, all this to say that I have a hard time believing that this Knicks front office doesn't have a plan for the backup center position. There have been rumors that maybe the Knicks are going after Walker Walker Kessler
See,
from
but that's
Utah.
not happening. Like they're out of picks.
No, no,
They
no. I'm just explaining that that's one of the things that they want to do. I wouldn't put it past this front office. I think dealing with the devil. I mean Danny Ainge is going to
oh
be a tough one. He's not going to help the Knicks, so he's probably going to ask for at least a first round pick.
We
Um,
don't have those. So that's why I think the
right.
answer is just going back into the G League, trying this out till February, because again, they really don't need to solve this until
Honestly,
April.
we already know what the Knicks are going to do. Why are we pretending like we don't? They're going to probably sign Taj Gibson at some point.
I mean, he probably will be here and he probably will play.
Like
I
if they
mean,
don't,
just
like if they don't find anyone, are you or me going to be surprised that it's Taj? No,
no.
no.
And Taj, Taj basically said he thought he was done. And he had to call in the middle of the night, like, hey, can you give me 15 minutes? And he's like, this guy's got to be kidding. Like, he's got to, like, what are you talking about? And he's there and he's trying, and
Anyway,
it's classic Tibbs. And
I'm kind of like you, just to put a bow on this. I'm kind of like you where I'm not stressing over the center thing. I think a lot of people in the Knicks space were sort of panicky about what that means for this roster as we have like a lot of the pieces that'll make us look good. I'm like you, I'm not stressing out. Mitchell Robinson was the center main before Isaiah, and Hartenstein wouldn't even started if Mitch didn't get injured. So
that's
I'm
the only concern I have. It's just, first of all, every stretch we've had where Mitch is playing his best basketball, it's like, wow, he looks like he's really breaking out into like a legit elite rim runner and center, and then he gets hurt. And I don't think that's going to change. I think
I
he's
don't
always
to be
hurt.
fair, I don't think it will either. I'm just saying for now it's fine to have him on the ship.
Yeah. No, what I was going to say is like, as long as he's healthy, I'm not worried about this position. I'm not worried about their depth there. I think they're going to be fine. It's more just if he goes down, now I'm concerned. That's all.
True, true. All right, we'll see. And like you said, like the buyout market, there's going to be a guy or two that we'll look at, and I think we'll move forward from there.
Absolutely, for sure. All right, Chris, let's see what's left this offseason. We just talked about Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz. Lauri Markkanen's name seems to still be on the market. I'm a little surprised they would be willing to move him. I guess they don't really want to pay him what he's worth next, but at the same time, I think this is a guy who I would be interested in holding on to if I'm Utah.
Yeah, it seems like Laurie sort of fits their timeline better than most of the most of the other things happening. I don't really understand it either, but if people are willing to pay a king's ransom for Laurie Markkinen, I say why not? That being said, I don't know what deal makes sense here unless it's just like another treasure trove of first round picks with which, there's only a few teams that can really offer that makes sense for the Utah Jazz. Um, the Sixers are reportedly interested. The Warriors are reportedly interested. But Laurie's a great fit for many teams. Um, yeah, I mean, that being said, I mean, would you want where do you think so if you had to predict where he plays when the season tips off in October, where do you
I
see him?
think Utah. I think Utah's the place. I think if a team does move him, I think the two teams that really could use a win right now, a really good young player who's emerged as a legit all-star, Miami and Golden State. I don't know how they're going to make those things work because both those teams kind of don't seem to have a ton of assets. Is Tyler Hero an asset anymore? It seems like the answer to that is no. Is you know is Padinsky and Kaminga and some picks and a Wiggins contract to make the money work? Is that something that Utah will be interested in? I'm not really sure about that either. You think Kaminga is a star, so maybe they would be. I also think Kaminga's going to be good, just for the record, but I think you're higher on him than I am. I think if I'm Utah, I'm holding on to him. I really think that's the way to go. The one guy I'd be interested in seeing how this plays out is Brandon Ingram. It seems like New Orleans is very open to moving him. It seems like they don't want to pay him that new super max, Chris.
Yeah, and I think and you know what? I don't blame them. I think to take a chance on a player like that is tough. Brandon Ingram hasn't shown that he can do anything beyond like really ISO scoring. Seems to be kind of like a player that makes sense with the Pelicans when Zion's out, but like once Zion's there, the fit doesn't seem to work. And Ingram was a player that was on the FIBA team, I believe, and Kerr even benched him. Like it just shows you that like as good as Ingram is as an individual player, like there's maybe something to him that doesn't make him conducive to winning. So, I mean, I just fear that whoever gives him that contract will have buyer's remorse. And Brandon Ingram is a player that I don't know. I don't know if I want to invest 200 million in Brandon Ingram.
Brandon Ingram just hasn't shown that he can play great basketball with other guys. He has not played his best basketball with Zion. He did not play obviously well in FIBA. And even with the Lakers, with LeBron and all them, obviously he was a much different player. He's a younger player. Before he came into his own, he didn't play well there either. So I think to trade assets for a guy that you have to pay 200 million to, it doesn't seem like the best idea. I like him as a player, but I don't know if he's going to move either. So I'm really curious to see how this all plays out. And then the last guy is Russell Westbrook. There were reports that he was going to Denver in a trade that he got the $4 million option picked up, and then the Clippers said they were going to move on. That didn't happen. So I'm curious how that one plays out because I think him on a contender would be a lot of fun again.
I think him specifically in Denver would be such a great idea. But let's head over to final thoughts. The Sacramento Kings pulled off a trade with the Bulls to get DeMar DeRozan in a Kings uniform. And I think my first thought was, wow, this is a really great fit. This is someone who can really make the Kings an even more dynamic offense. Not sure if they necessarily needed more help on the offensive end. So that to me is the biggest question mark. Like the Kings are definitely leaning into their identity, but haven't addressed their biggest need, which is defense. So, I mean, I have them as one of the top 8 teams in the West, but I don't know. I feel like what does this really accomplish except giving, you know, the Kings another mid-range scorer? I don't think this moves the needle that much for the Kings, if I'm being quite honest with you.
I like it for the Kings. I really believe that he's a huge upgrade over Harrison Barnes. I'm just really concerned what the Bulls are doing here. Like you still have Levine, you still have Lonzo's contract, you move Caruso, you moved DeRozan. Like you didn't really get anything for either of those guys. Like where was I mean, I'm sorry, they got Giddy for Caruso, so I like that for them. But like, what is this team? Like, why did they wait 3 years to rebuild? I mean, it's better late than ever, but like here we are.
Well, they'd be in good position for the 2025 draft, which is a better draft. There's already like, campaigns for Cooper Flag, there's SAG for the flag, fail for flag, capture the flag. Um, but you know, at least it seems like the Bulls are know what direction they're finally getting in. Maybe a little too late. Um, but anyway, one of the other signings that really caught my eye too was Caleb Martin actually going to the Sixers. And Caleb Martin was a player who I did very good things for the Miami Heat when they beat the Boston Celtics. Was it 2 years ago? In the Western Conference, in the Eastern Conference Finals. He looked like such an amazing player then. And I think him going to the Sixers actually is a great fit. He's going to be the eighth best player. And you could argue he was the best player on the Miami Heat during that run, during that playoff series against the Boston Celtics 2 years ago. So you have someone who's a little bit playoff tested. Certainly an upgrade over a guy like, it's just to have a guy like that as the seventh or eighth man off your bench. That's going to do wonders for the Sixers.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, buddy. All right, that's our final thoughts. Anything else you have before we wrap up the show?
Last thing, Team USA looked great against Canada. It's still exhibition before the Olympics. I think Team USA is going to dominate these Paris Olympics, and that's all on my end. But what about you, Steve? Are you good?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I think, yeah, they're going to dominate here. I think this is going to be a kind of an easy one for them. We talk about this all the time. Obviously, the talent around the country is getting better, but I think um, this is till the U.S. is to win. They have three All NBA centers. They have, scorers galore, All NBA guys, and I think this is going to be a fun time to see some great players all play together.
Agreed.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. I thank you very much, Chris, as always. Thank you to our listeners on Apple and Spotify, our watchers on YouTube, and we'll be back next week to talk some Olympic action and some more NBA action as well.